Oh, there it goes. Um, Jeannie Burris is my partner in crime here. She is a programmer extraordinaire and the assistant manager of patron services at the main library. And she is on vacation this week and popped in to help support our program. So thank you, Jeannie, so much. Everybody, welcome. I want to give you just a little bit of background on how this program came to fruition. This program is made possible by the Yiddish Book Center in Amherst, Massachusetts, which is an absolutely magical place. And if you have never been there, please, please, please go in your lifetime. It is so amazing. And the entire town is absolutely stunning. So everybody get there. They're doing amazing work there, archiving not only books, but oral histories and just so many facets of Yiddish life. But anyway, we wrote a grant last year through adult programming. Mark Christ, our director of adult programming, wrote this grant. And I was so fortunate in that I got to go in January of last year. I spent 3 days there at the center, just learning and absorbing and having a wonderful time speaking to 25 other librarians, getting to talk about 3 amazing books. So that's just a dream come true for many of us, I know. But we just want to thank you for being here. And you'll probably notice that in the chat, which you probably already know this, I'm so sorry if I'm over explaining. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a chat icon. You can click on and off of that at different times if you'd like to see questions that might be here or comments. I also have 3 links there that you can copy and paste into your browser if you open a separate window, and they will take you right to the Yiddish Book Center. They're going to tell you the history of the center, and there's also a link for the discussion of this book. And unfortunately, there just isn't going to be time to go over every bit of that history of the center in this hour. I wish that there was, but we will just run out of time very quickly. We'll try to discuss it at the end if we have a little bit of time. At this point, does anybody have a question? And I can't see you all at one time because there's so many things going on. So, but if you do, just please give me a shout out, okay? Or you can list anything that you'd like to in the chat. And at this point, we're going to switch over to our PowerPoint, hopefully. Can everyone see the PowerPoint on the screen?
No.
All right.
I don't. I can't even get full screen for some reason. I've got gallery view, but only half the gallery, and the rest of it's other stuff.
Okay, Sherry, hold on.
Why?
Okay, I see it. I mean, is it just a picture of a person reading a book?
That's it.
Yeah, I can see it too.
Okay. Okay, it's not absolutely necessary. It works for everyone, but it's helpful. We're going to read these questions out loud anywho, so it will be nice, but not completely necessary.
Okay.
Okay. So let's get that presentation. All right, so our cover shot here is the landing homepage for the Yiddish Book Center. They are celebrating this year 40 years of book rescue, digitalization, translation, educational programs, oral histories, and exhibitions. And truly, it is an absolutely magical place. Like I said, I went in the winter. There were no leaves on the trees, but you could absolutely tell that it's going to be stunning spring. So get yourself there. Let's see if I can get to that next slide. Okay. Whoops. All right. So welcome, everybody. And this program is made possible by the Yiddish Book Center and the Central Arkansas Library System. We are so pleased that you are here. And here's a little background on a Jewish refugee in New York by Kadya Molodowsky. She was born in 1894. She passed in 1975, and she was one of the most well-known and prolific writers of literature in the 20th century. Rivka Zilberg, a 20-year-old Jewish woman, arrives in New York shortly after the Nazi invasion of Poland, her home country. Struggling to learn a new language and cope with the different way of life of the United States, Rivka finds herself keeping a journal about the challenges and opportunities of this new land. Maladowski provides keen insight into the day-to-day activities of the large immigrant Jewish community of New York. And at this point, I just kind of like to throw in a little background information, and forgive me, again, I don't know how much history everyone knows about the Lower East Side of New York, turn of the century, specifically between 1904 and 1907. There were an estimated 4 million Jews on this side of Manhattan who had come from Eastern Europe, escaping the horrors that they were seeing there and looking for better opportunities. So I believe the border was closed to almost all immigrants about 1907, 1909, somewhere in there. So at that point, we've got a lot of folks in a very small area, and Rivka is definitely experiencing life in a very different way. The book, of course, is set several years later than that, but she's feeling that. So let's get to our first question. Everybody, this is a casual group. Just feel free to unmute and answer as you will. What do you think of Rivka? To what extent do you find her to be a sympathetic character? What makes her sympathetic or keeps her from being so?
I found the isolation and her trying to adapt, particularly the isolation in language, very compelling, and the difficulty and the links to her suffering family and the recent death of her mother.
I think she's very sympathetic because she had absolutely no control over her environment.
Yeah,
Yeah, I can imagine that lack of control.
she doesn't like that she's dependent on everybody else, though.
Trudy, that's exactly what I was going to say. She hates the word refugee, and she hates to feel that she's dependent on her aunt, who makes her feel like a second-class citizen,
Yeah.
which she is in fact a second-class citizen, but she's a second-class citizen within her own family because she's a refugee. I have a lot of sympathy for her.
Mhm.
And the language barrier is just huge. So
I actually found the language really compelling. I found that in the simple way that she described things, she was so on point that I found myself saying, wow, yeah, lots of times laughing at what she was saying because it was so true in such a simple sentence.
right,
Sometimes-
couldn't agree more with that, except that her own language barrier, even though she, we're getting it from her description, which is perfectly fluent, and then she alludes to all the language problems she's having and who's helping and who isn't. So
I'm sorry, but I just lost you again.
We see you
We hear you.
and we hear you and see you.
Okay. I see you up in my screen, but I don't know
So
what's happening. Okay.
sure.
should I continue?
Everyone, I'll share with you also, if you're having connectivity issues, a fairly good cheat, the video. You might want to just turn it on when you want to speak, or you can speak without your video. The video takes up so much room on your as far as what you're able to do. So sometimes that will have a problem if you're having connectivity issues.
I'm also facing the same mistake here.
Pardon?
I'm also facing the same problem, network errors.
Oh,
Yes.
that is very on point. Thank you for sharing.
Sure, no problem.
We were talking about the language, and I thought the writing was, particularly the translation was brilliant, because the author is writing in Yiddish. And I'm guessing that the things that were in, not parentheses, but italics, was the way Rivka perceived the
Mhm.
English with a very strong Yiddish accent.
Which made it very hard to understand and read.
Oh, I disagree. I thought that made it easier.
It was fascinating because every time I got to those points in the text, I had to stop and say it out loud.
Well,
Like, the one I loved the best was Job. DZ,
I like-
whatever it was.
Cake. I
Which-
liked cake.
Oh, cake. Yeah.
I like cake. I liked cake.
What I
That's
would
the
like,
way- That's the way she heard the English. And I'm remembering, talking to my grandparents and boy, their English initially, that's the way they spoke. I mean, it was just fascinating the way the translator, who's an integral part of this book, did the conversion, translation. Yeah.
what I'd like to know is how many of you grew up with your grandparents speaking Yiddish?
You did too.
Nah, I don't
really?
remember them
Oh, you
speaking
just
much.
remember.
They probably did.
Actually, my parents spoke fluent Yiddish also.
I
Any,
have
I'm
one-
just curious, does anyone read or write Yiddish?
My mother could, but I never picked it up.
Our parents spoke Yiddish, so we wouldn't understand.
Exactly.
So our generation didn't really learn Yiddish, which
I
to my dismay now, but everybody's gone.
Reading
Oh,
the book, it strikes me that I'm the first generation in my family where Yiddish wasn't the primary language spoken at home. I had the luxury of growing up in an English-speaking family, which my parents didn't.
Well, my parents didn't speak Yiddish except when they wanted to talk.
exactly. As soon
My-
as we started understanding, they stopped. Yeah.
My grandmother used to tell whole jokes in English and then laugh hysterically and tell the punchline in Yiddish. And her sister would all laugh, and I would sit there and I would just laugh because it sounded hilarious, but I had no idea what she said.
that was
Yeah,
her other grandmother, not my
Right,
family,
she-
Jerry's family.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I think everybody here is bringing up some really strong points. And the whole program of Coming to America is designed for us to examine immigration patterns and thoughts politically and emotionally and morally around particular events in history, and particularly this one, this migration of Jewish folks. So everybody brings up a good point. And one thing that I have really noticed in every community that I know, every English is a second language community, everyone has these stories where their grandparents or parents only spoke their native language when they were trying to get away with something. So I love the universality of that, for sure. All right, so let's get to our second question.
Well, one other thing about the language, she also had, it was kind of fun when she was making fun of Red for
Yes.
his bad Yiddish.
Broken Yiddish,
Right.
which was hilarious. Yeah.
Yeah, that was funny.
Right, and we learned quite a bit about how Yiddish came about when we were at the Yiddish Book Center, and the fact that she's making fun of a language that's parts of many different languages to begin with is kind of funny, the way that she's treating Red about it. So our second question is, how would you describe the relationship between Rivka and her relatives in New York? And I know that we've touched on that, but if anyone would like to give me some other thoughts, I'd love to hear.
I think it's complicated. I think that the fact that the young women saw themselves as commodities with limited shelf life, very competitive. So, she's clearly has a better expiration date than Selma, her cousin, So she kind of has to be pushed away to give Selma a chance to get sold.
Well, it's not just about the expiration date, though. There's a mieskiteness about Selma.
Yeah.
So if anybody missed that,
Oh, yeah.
ugly. Okay, so there's something about Selma that's not so pretty,
Right.
and Rivka really seems to have it all going on
Yeah.
with effortlessly.
Yes.
People are drawn to her.
And she doesn't even understand it or know it or worry or think about it or appreciate it.
But she does see that, what you say, mishkiteness. I mean, because she said her aunt looks like her mother, but doesn't have the same smile.
Yeah,
But it was a nice way of saying she didn't have the kindness that her mother. And did anybody notice that every time she referred to her mother, which goes back generations and we don't do it anymore, but if a person had died within the last year, they say, may she rest in peace. And I was wondering if anybody who was not Jewish would realize that that was typical of our grandparents and even our parents, some of them, who hadn't been born in the United States. But you never mention their name within the year of them passing away. May she or he rest in peace.
I think there are people who still talk that way today in the Orthodox community.
Do you?
Yeah, talk to
Yeah.
Rabbi Smith.
Yeah,
They
They'll
don't
say,
mention the
Oliver
name.
Shalom,
not for the
Oliver
first year.
Shalom, Oliver Shalom.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. They're not really. They're not, I don't think Rabbi Smith's saying may he or she rest in peace.
No.
Okay.
No, but they'll say a
Well, they
blessed
say
memory.
Oliver Shalom.
No, I know, but they're not going to say. It struck me as very not so Jewishy to be
But that's
saying.
English translation of it. You know, they're saying Oliver Shalom.
I know that.
I have another question for everybody. For those whose grandparents or parents spoke Yiddish, did you resent it at all? Were you trying to be completely Americanized? And because I feel guilty that I would, when my grandmother would start going on in Yiddish, I'd say, you're living in the United States, you have to speak English. And I'm sorry for that now, because I could have learned so much from her Yiddish, her experiences in the old country.
No, I never felt that way. I resented the fact that they stopped speaking it when I started understanding it, because I would have loved to have been able to speak it. What used to upset me, though, was, and they had been here for a very long time by the time we had these conversations, was the way they talked about the old country in glowing terms. I used to say to them, you know, you left.
Yeah, why aren't you still there then?
What was so special about it? But as I got older, as a full adult, because I was a young teenager at the time, I think it's home, regardless of how long you've been somewhere else. And this is something that Rivka's going through in the diary, basically, that she's caught between two places. She's Rivka becoming Ray. She's a Lubliner becoming an American. And it's, I think, you know, we haven't lived in Philadelphia for 22 years, but it's still home. It's still, and it will always be home. It's very strange. So yeah, I really identified with her missing home.
And she tried to explain that with the stars in the sky, them being backwards, or the United States being backwards, but that she liked the stars in the sky back in Lublin.
Yeah, I mean, it's, and she knew what was happening there. You know, she was getting word how awful it was at this point.
Yeah.
Did
Actually,
you,
the metaphor for the stars in the sky was the only thing I found annoying in the book because the stars in the sky in Poland would be exactly the same because it has to do with what latitude you're on. If she had moved to South America, it would have been different. But the stars, if you looked in the sky, you would see it would look exactly the same.
but I think she was using it as a way of expressing.
Oh yeah,
Everything seemed upside down to her.
Exactly.
but I just meant that.
He's taking
That
an
was the author.
astronomy course.
No, but the author kind of messed that up. You should have used a different metaphor.
The scientists.
I wondered if you got that out of your astronomy book right now.
Yeah, but was it her? Was it actually Rivka? Because I think it was the laundress
Yeah.
who did that. And are we supposed to depend on her? I mean, seriously, Rivka could, but I don't know that she was some sort of authority. Not like Bruce.
Well, no, but you look up. The stars looked upside down to her. There's the constellations and stuff, and that.
She also put
Yeah.
pictures in and out of drawers depending on her mood. So let's get serious.
Hey, Bruce, do you think it's possible that even though astronomically her statement would have been incorrect, that maybe on a certain level, life in America felt upside down for her, maybe?
It was a metaphor. As
Well,
somebody pointed out, yeah.
I understand what the metaphor is supposed to mean. The problem was the author never looked at the sky. She looked at people, she talked to people, but she used a bad metaphor.
Bruce, I'm glad you brought that.
Book, I might add.
Bruce, I'm glad you brought that up because when I read that part, I went, really? I didn't know that, because I know nothing about astronomy.
It's hemisphere. It's a hemisphere.
Yeah. So I just let it pass on. But to me, I thought I was learning something. Now I'm learning something.
Okay.
Well, back to the question.
Yeah, please.
I think the question that just was up, I think the family only had so much, they couldn't be more generous. Selma took so long to find herself Eddie, she wasn't about to share him. They only had a certain number of coats, or there were a certain number of beds, or potatoes, or whatever. And it seems like they were also victims of powerlessness to some degree. And I think they did what they could. And I think that's most immigrant stories when they go to live with relatives.
did anybody get upset with the pettiness and the things that they were talking about while the people in the old country were literally being killed? I mean, Rivka seems to be the only one, except, well, I should say she wasn't the only one, but some of the women were so petty and were being concerned about things that were so unimportant when people were struggling for their lives.
You know, I excuse me, I agree with that. But on the flip side, there were a few men in the story that were really magnanimous. Fishbein or Fish something, who just did what he needed to do, and the one that was the professor, I forgot the name. Started
Scheingold or Scheinman.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean those. There was some type of a balance going on there. I don't want to say it was between the men and the women, although it seems that way looking at it now. But there was a balance between, you know, who was more giving of whatever little they had, and who was just gonna, you know, be petty about it.
I think that might be a reflection of who had the money, who had the power. So I think the men could be more generous because they had control of money largely. You know, women had very little in that, within this context of the book.
That makes sense.
Yeah, the wives were not working. They were home doing their thing.
And that's brought up in the preface about the women's place in writing and in society, and that they thought of Yiddish as a female language and Hebrew as a male language.
Well, Yiddish was
You didn't read the introduction.
Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't read the introduction.
Well, I
If
just
I-
scanned it.
If I could jump in there real quickly, I'm going to tell you, it's definitely worth copying and pasting one of these links, the one to the discussion about this book on the Yiddish Book Center site, but I'm just going to quickly read a paragraph from the discussion page. Particularly poignant are the different understandings of two keywords that are frequently repeated: fire and war. When Rivka thinks of fire, she is thinking about the Nazi bombs that burned Lublin to the ground and killed her mother. And when her uncle talks about fire consuming his family, he is referring to the cost of their daughter's wedding and the money burned through it and paying for it. We know what Rivka is referring to when she talks about war. What the women of the Lublin Ladies Society call a war is the battle over who should send thank you notes after a fundraising event. I think that this was recognized as a problem with a lot of readers of this book. So let's move on to our next question. What is the difference between calling Rivka a refugee, an exile, or an immigrant?
Well, you can be all three.
But there is a different sort of connotation
Yeah,
to refugee.
But they all apply.
But a refugee is somebody who is seeking refuge from an immigrant could be somebody who just decided to immigrate to another country.
Yeah, refugee is running from something, leaving something
I
bad.
took the liberty of actually looking up each word and writing the definition down for the purpose of the discussion. Would you like me to share it?
Please.
Yes, please.
Okay. So a refugee is one who is forced to leave the country to escape war, persecution, or natural disaster. An exile is barred from the native country for political or punitive reasons. And then an immigrant is defined as a person who comes to live permanently in a foreign country. So the definition is just slightly different. On page 4 of the book, she hated the word refugee. And in the book, it says, what a horrible word, refugee. The word is a curse. It probably comes from refuse or garbage. A refugee is truly cursed, discarded, and worthless. And I thought that was sad that she felt that way. And I think, her family contributed to that a little bit in making her feel unwanted.
Well, just the term greenhorn, which is used. I mean, there are Yiddish songs about the green cousine, the green cousin. Doesn't kind of, when you speak a foreign language and not English and you come to this country, you're sometimes perceived as being stupid, which is certainly not the case in most instances. I mean, people are not stupid just because they don't speak English. They're also not deaf, so you don't speak it louder, make them understand. So I think that's a common misperception among everybody, really. All groups, all ethnic groups, and all people. I mean, the country is made up of immigrants. Even the Native Americans are immigrants from, from Asia. So it's just interesting.
Well, society sort of looked down on the immigrants. And if they called them refugees, they looked a little farther down. It was like a stepping stone, something you had to overcome in her mind, I think.
I think in the book, she really is changing from being a refugee to an immigrant, because there's an evolution. She starts out, she clearly is a refugee in the beginning, forgetting the subtext, just using the actual meanings of the words. But her experiences and who she's becoming makes her more into an immigrant by the end. It's not a sharp demarcation, it's an evolution.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
I think that's a great point, Bruce. Okay, let's go to our next one. And how does Rivka describe the struggle to learn a foreign language, in this case, English? And I have to tell you guys that I've been learning Spanish for 3 or 4 years, and I'm okay proficient, but still struggle every time I try to use it. So I certainly understand this problem.
Yeah.
It's well, she goes to school. I mean, that's what she thinks to do. You know, she goes to school to learn.
I think it was interesting in the book, on page 6, I had this underline. Her aunt comes in and she says, and it's written in the italics in how she hears it pronounced. And she says, "Don't be foolish," she said, and she left the room. What does that mean? Are these curse words or are they words of comfort? Who knows what this means in America?
Right.
And I thought that was such a, glaring example of how, I think even sometimes in a foreign language, the words can sound the same, but they have different meanings. Like in English, the word wind can mean wind or it can mean wind,
Oh,
and just imagine how, and I've heard people say that English is a very difficult language to learn if it's not your native language because of all these different things. So I just thought that was interesting.
They also brought up that prepositions are very hard to learn in English. I mean, sometimes you can say in trouble, or they put an example in the book and I didn't mark it, but there was one description that you used the same words, and if the preposition was different, the meaning was completely different.
right.
And it's how you
So the-
often spot people who are from other places is by their misuse of prepositions. The
Yeah.
other thing I kind of noticed was the emphasis on the pronoun she, when she started to hear a lot of she's and realized it was about her.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Or the
And you-
difference between
Yeah.
saying all right once and saying all right, all right. But what I thought was really interesting, it wasn't Rivka, it was the author, that once she mastered a word, it stopped being italicized. This was something she understood, and we'd go on to another word that would get italicized. And I think that's how she described learning a language.
I missed that. Thank
Yeah.
you, Carrie.
I missed that too.
well, you could see the build up of how she was learning more and more and more, so you didn't have to hear the old. It was cool.
They also introduced greener greenhorns in the book with the was it Malishes?
Mockless.
Yeah. And so she felt good in the class because there was someone who clearly knew less than she did.
Someone greener than her.
It's sort of a backhanded way of showing that she had been making constant progress. So I thought that was sort of a backhand way of kind of showing that her progress.
Some people are natural learners of other languages. It comes to them easily. And some people struggle their whole lives when they move to a country that speaks a different language. I mean, their whole lives. I saw an example of that when I worked in the medical library, that we had a Cuban refugee. I mean, they really were refugees that came, and his wife got her PhD here, and he never adjusted to living in America. He never got over being forced out of his country, his homeland. It was an interesting thing to watch.
I sort of had that with my in-laws. You know, they started with German, and of course they knew Yiddish, but they didn't use it. And then they learned Hebrew, and then they came here to learn. They learned English, and oftentimes when we were in a direct conversation, because they would really work hard on their English, but when I was listening to, they would mix all three of them together in all sorts of sentences, and you know, it's just the way it evolved. You know, you get I'd get all the English, Mickey'd get some of the German, I'd get some of the Hebrew, and between us, we would try to put it together, what it meant. You know, like I said, not one-on-one, because they were very careful to get it right one-on-one, but if they were speaking to their friends, or their friends did the same thing. They had a whole group of people who mixed the three languages together.
I was having lunch with Becky once at a restaurant in New York. It was a small restaurant, so you couldn't help but overhear. And there was a four-top next to us, two mothers and their daughters. And at that table, between the four of them, they spoke 5 different languages. Just
Oh my
back and
God.
forth.
And that goes back to Lynn's point that they were looked down as maybe not as intelligent, but these people knew Yiddish, Polish, some Hebrew, and they were trying to learn English. I don't know 4 languages. I don't probably know anybody on the screen that does. I mean, that's not stupid by a long shot.
That is true.
Maybe
You know,
Meg
that-
does.
You know, that reminds me, remember Emmanuel Krupitsky?
Yeah, I started to say the same
I
thing.
never heard him say a word ever. And everyone else in his world was all speaking English to all of us. And he just stood there quietly for the whole 25 years I ever knew him.
Right.
Right, you're right.
I thought of him too.
Oh,
That's
I think
interesting.
different people have different, you know, some people just never adjust.
Well, there's a difference between adjusting and learning the new language.
Bless
I
you.
know people
Yeah,
who have never adjusted to living, say, in this country, but they speak English. They just don't like it. And people who have adjusted very well in their neighborhoods, in their family, and they like being here, but they don't speak English. They never picked up English.
Yeah, you're right. It's a different, well,
Mhm.
A great point. Let's go on to our next session, everybody. What is the significance of the name changes in the book? And we have already touched on this. Again, it's another language in the book, but I think it ties in nicely with what we've already said. So our examples are Rivka to Ray or Ruth, and Laser to Larry or Red, etc. Examples are throughout the book.
It's just a matter of trying to fit in the new country
Mhm.
and be more accepted, I think.
But she wasn't choosing those names.
No, but others, I mean, you're asking
Chose
about
for her.
general question.
Yeah.
it's mine.
I don't think she had any, you're absolutely right. They were just given to her. And I don't think she had any problem with her name Rivka. But people were trying to make her more Americanized.
Mhm.
The
And
last,
The last page of the books.
the last page of the book, I was
Pages it, yeah.
I wear the engagement ring, and I think that Rivka Zilberg no longer exists. In New York, someone named Ray Levitt will soon be walking around. Rivka Zilberg remained in Lublin. Someone in Palestine is waiting for Rivka Zilberg, and Ray Levitt lives in New York. I just got the chills when I read that again.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Lynn, for
That was
rereading.
her
Well, I mean,
evolution.
I mean, if you go all the way biblical on this point, a name change is always a significance in terms of a changing of who you are, how you perceive yourself, or how other people perceive you. Yeah.
I've always heard, I'm not Jewish, of course, but I've always heard that in Hebrew, that a person's name was who they were. Is that the correct understanding?
Was what?
I didn't hear that.
So I said I'm not Jewish, but I've always understood that, like in Hebrew, a person's name was very closely tied in with the, the identity. And in other words, like a person's name was like, this is who you are. It wasn't just, is that a correct understanding or no?
That's not just in Judaism.
Yeah,
That's
American Indians.
It's universal.
I think that a lot of people got their names, their new American names, when they were coming through Ellis Island or whatever places they came through. They'd say, "What do you do for a living?" And they'd say, "I'm Model the Taylor." And their last name would become Taylor, or,
I come
Butcher.
from Vienna, so I'm a wiener. Right.
So a lot of it was as they entered the United States, they were given the name.
But I think the identity you were talking about is more for their Hebrew names.
Yes, yes. Well, and it does say in, I think it's Talmud, you know, that if you destroy a man's name by idle gossip or you know, calling him something that he's not, like it's like murder. If you're trying to destroy a person's name, you're destroying his integrity, his position in the world. It's you have to be very careful when you mess around with somebody's identity, you know, who they are.
There's also a Jewish tradition that if somebody is really, really sick, you change their name so they,
Yes, so the evil eye.
evil eye can't find them. Yeah, because they,
I don't know, growing up in a Jewish household, I was always looking around for the Dybbuk. I wanted to know where this Dybbuk was and why he was after me. It was amazing.
I love that so much. Okay, we'll put that one. There are 3 young men who want to pursue a relationship with Rivka. Why do you think she chooses red? And I'd like to just put this question out there as well. I thought it was so interesting that a young lady would have red in her bedroom by, you know, accompanied by a chaperone at that time. I realized that her landlady was just around the corner there, but I thought that was interesting, and maybe I'm completely wrong.
Well, it wasn't so much a question of it being her bedroom as that she was in a very small space. So I think more like not necessarily like a studio apartment, it was just a room. So you couldn't get away from her bed. And we really saw that when Ruth and Selma came and completely wrecked the bed in Rivka's eyes. Oh, and if we're going to answer this one about the 3 young men, can we just throw Eddie immediately under the bus for sheer scuzziness?
Yeah. That was going to be a lifetime of problems because they're all there in the family together and he is still wanting her, not his wife now.
Yeah.
That was so gross.
Yeah, it was a matter of convenience. I hate to say it. I mean, one is 4,000 miles away. The other one's taken by the family that's providing her every need. There was only one left.
Right. And he was persistent enough and she liked him enough.
But there were problems with him, which maybe we should discuss. I mean, he was nice, but he was controlling as hell. So let's discuss amongst yourselves.
And even some of the women who knew him before Rivka came said that he was just, he wasn't, you know, I forget the word they used to describe him.
A bum or a loafer.
Yeah, a loafer.
Eddie.
Jitterbug or something.
Yeah, like
that was Eddie, but Jitterbug, like jitterbug. But
Yeah.
But
What did that mean, Jerry Bug? What did that mean?
Well, I think it had to do with the jitterbug one, the dance, and I think it just meant flighty.
it wasn't invented for 20 years after this.
Or it wasn't about the dance, and it might have been about astronomy for all I know.
There's a constellation called Jitterbug.
No, I kind of got. I don't know. I have no idea what the word means, but I kind of got the thing of someone who kind of like moves from thing to thing and isn't very serious. Kind of the way some bugs kind of move, like water bugs and stuff like that.
Sort of flaky.
Yeah.
I tried to look it up, and every time I tried on Google to look it up, I kept getting different kinds of bugs. I mean, I couldn't ever find a definition of it, so I just went by it.
But I thought the criticism was wasn't it more of Eddie than?
Yeah.
That was more of Eddie, yeah. You say like Red looks good because he's standing next to Eddie.
Perfect.
Does that do it for you, Meg?
Yes. 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 Yes.
That's hilarious.
That's how probably, right?
This Eddie was
okay, everybody.
Predecessor for Eddie Haskell.
Right.
I, for one, felt bad for Laser in Palestine. I mean, she didn't even let him know that, you know, she was getting married here. It would have broken his heart, but it was better than her not letting him know anything. I thought that was wrong of her.
Yeah.
That bothered me too. But
Bothered me as well.
talked about that, and Bruce thought that maybe she didn't know what she was going to do either. It wasn't until the end that she realized that she was where she needed to be, and not.
It really just kind of suddenly happened to her, the engagement. I mean, all along she was just kind of seeing him, and then suddenly she says, well, give me the ring, I'll put it on. You know, it's not like she made a decision that, yes, I think I love him and I want to marry him.
But I give her credit. She wasn't going to give up on her pride or what she had back in the old country. He wanted to give it to her at the wedding of her cousin, and she said no, she didn't want to ride on along on the coattails of somebody else, and that it wasn't the appropriate time or place. And so she sort of stood her ground, that she wasn't going to give up certain principles that she had.
The other guy who always talks whenever he wants to talk.
Everyone, let's take that point and move into this next question, and we've been doing that. Contrast the three places that are important in Rivka's life, New York and Palestine, before the creation of the state of Israel. And we've just kind of a good segue into that, talking about how she did not inform her former beau about the new relationship.
Oh, I mean, of the three places, clearly Palestine was the most remote to her. She hadn't been there. She didn't really know much about it, really, except for Laser being there. Her strong connection to Lublin, of course, is throughout the thing, and her immediate relationship and growing relationship with New York is also increasing as the book goes through.
It's always interesting to me how she managed, this is before GPS, before cell phones, you know, before anything, how she managed to get all around New York without, you know, on her own, buses and subways. And I mean, it's just fascinating to me. She found her way to, was it Steinfeld? The guy that was
the guy really wealthy guy.
Scheinfeld.
Steinfeld was the professor. The wealthy guy was Edelstein.
Yeah.
Edelstein?
Edelstein was the wealthy guy.
Yeah, Edelstein. Okay. The way she found her way to his office. I mean, I was just fascinated. You know, she just had an address and she found it. I mean, I had trouble with maps. You know. I mean,
well, she said it was really hard at first, right? The north, the south, the subway, and what she needed to do. So,
yeah, but New York is very logically put together, though.
It's true.
That I think that.
Well, that's Manhattan.
Well,
only Manhattan. Yeah.
Well, I think that the way New York was put together in terms of being an immigrant is, you know, has a lot of advantages. It's very compact, the areas that she's going to be in.
That's true.
So you could learn it pretty quickly.
I don't know. I was impressed.
I think I'm with Lynn on this, because if you throw in the language barrier on top of being directionally challenged, of which I'm one of those people, I can't even imagine the two of those trying to, you know, navigate your way around that city. So I don't know.
You could go to New York today to find different immigrants who don't speak English
doing the same thing,
who still get around on the subways and everything like that.
That's impressive.
I know I spent a lot of time in New York, and I'm with you. I cannot find my way around. If the subway, if you have to switch trains, it's a whole different ballgame. And I have a friend who says to me, "You speak English, don't you?" And I say, "Yes, but I am Cartesianally challenged."
I'm not so sure though, the section that she was in New York was that large. I mean, I think the section where the people from any one country was from, so in this case, Loveland, was relatively contained in a certain area. I mean, it's not like she had to do the whole island of Manhattan or anything. I mean, you get your locale within that.
She was always within her own community.
Yeah.
Sherry, that's a really great point, and that most of the signage would have been in a language that she could understand at this point. Well, it was, so, you know, there were literally, depending on the numbers that you look at, this area that she would have been living in would have had several million Jewish folks in it. So she would certainly have been able to get help probably in her native language from some folks. Okay.
Well,
so,
and Yiddish newspapers too. So
absolutely. So important to this point. And that's something that I hope that you will look at when you visit the Yiddish Book Center, either online or in person. I am telling you, they have stacks and stacks and stacks, and they are absolutely fascinating, especially the ads. So please check that out. All right, we are probably not going to get to all our questions, but that is fine with me. We're having such a good discussion, but let's hit as many as we can. Rivka describes several individuals and institutions who are aid to refugees and still in Europe. How does she think of them? What does she think of them? And what did you think of them? A lot of questions in one question.
Well, I think it went on for quite a lot of years. I mean, even HIAS, which was the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, is now no longer the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. It is now an aid society for all people coming in from other countries. So I think that these original, like the Lubliners, they coagulated into larger, like the Jewish, it wasn't Federation, it was whatever they called it up in Boston.
Welfare Society.
They didn't call it Welfare Society, but they got these Lubliners, and my father was from a place that I can't recall right now, but they helped their own when they came here, but then they got together and then they made them just larger charitable organizations for the help of all Jewish people. So you no longer could go to someplace that just helped Lubliners.
I think though that the question about the book itself, rather than just the history, is interesting, because you had several organizations, some which were women's organizations, which were more interested in the women than what they were supposed to be doing, you know, in little hen fights about who's going to be in charge and who's going to get credit for whatever. Then you had somewhat larger organizations which had become more bureaucratic over time and maybe less feeling and sensitive. But within them, you had individuals like the Messiah, who didn't lose that touch of that we're here for individuals. We're not here for furniture or for the building. So I think that within the short book, she really painted several different pictures of what was going on. And I'm not sure that it's any different with organizations today that are charitable organizations for different things than it was at that time.
Also, another thing that is typical of the time, a lot of organizations started out as women's organizations, and then the men, when they grew to a certain size, took over the women's auxiliaries, and they took over the running of these organizations as they became larger.
Go ahead, Lynn.
No, I was just going to say there's very little discussion in the book about synagogues, actual synagogues, you know, and rabbis taking over and helping people and stuff. I find that interesting.
Well, the one rabbi, but he's really transactional, right? he wasn't, it wasn't about him
Yeah.
being the one who wrote the letter.
Ah, right.
Yeah.
And all the people were waiting to see him and blah, blah, blah. I thought we got a lot about, further to this question, about bureaucracy too. That
Yeah.
she'd go and she'd try to get around the line somehow, but she had to go through the same word I'm thinking of.
She gotta get passed through like 4 different people to get to who she wanted to. each
Yes.
And they
And
didn't.
she kind of liked that second to last one, even though she didn't speak Yiddish, but she liked her. So
And then they
It's the-
made her a boy.
It's
They
the
did
whole,
the first job for a boy.
It's the hallmark of America, everyone. Bureaucracy, the hallmark of America.
Everyone, we are unfortunately 1 minute away from Zoom probably cutting us off and us not getting to say goodbye. I hope that you will all join us for our next one. We were doing these on the 4th Wednesday of each month. I expect to see you here. This is our book. You were probably all aware. Let me see if I can get in there.
Yep.
Mortal the Cantor's Son, which I got to tell you, my husband loves so much, he read twice. If you need a copy, contact me. I will get you one. I know several of you picked up all the books in the series. That's great. Some of you did not, and that's also great. So just drop me an email. Let me know that you need one, and I'll get it to you. And thank you all so very much for this beautiful and rich discussion. And again, check out those links.
Yeah.
Visit the Yiddish Book Center online. They have fabulous programs. I've attended several
Courtney,
recently. So
thank you
please
so
do
much.
that.
And would you mind sending us new links for the next book club? Because
Yes.
Yes.
thanks again, I
Yes.
got on, but I couldn't get on.
Okay, Courtney,
Absolutely.
Courtney, if you've got the list of all the email, or if you have the emails of everyone here, if you can send that to me, I can send out the next Zoom link, or you can, whatever works.
Absolutely.
Okay,
And I'll check with everybody individually and make sure you've all gotten it, okay?
Thank you.
perfect.
And thank you for making sure we got our books and bringing my books out to closer to home. We really appreciate you doing this and getting
Well,
this book
I
club
really
together.
appreciate you all. And it's given me an opportunity to learn about a part of my heritage that I don't know a whole lot about. So I love hearing your stories. And it's just a really heartwarming experience for me. And I'm glad that you all found it that way too. So
Yeah, thank you.
we'll
Thank you
discuss
so
again.
much.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Jeannie, for all your help.
Courtney,
What
can you
is the
stay on the
next
call for a
book?
minute?
Thank you.
Courtney, will you
Yeah, of
stay on the
course, yeah.
call?
Okay,
I
well,
guess I don't know what the next book is, but I guess I'll find out.
It is Mortal the Cantor's Son
okay.
by Sholem Aleichem. Yeah.
Okay, so
Ah,
they're all Jewish. We're not dealing with the other cultures. Well,
Except the last one.
I thought maybe coming to America was going to
We
represent
have
us.
chosen a book that deals with Asian and Hispanic Latinx culture. We're mirroring those groups into this discussion because they are our largest immigrant population in Little Rock. So we will discuss the parallels of this immigration 100 plus years ago with what we're seeing today. And that will be the purpose of that 4th book.
Awesome. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
It's so great to meet you all. We've really enjoyed it.
Thank
Do you
you.
want us to return the book that we finished? Or all at the
Don't
same
worry,
time?
no, all at one time is just fine, Lynn. Thank you for asking that. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye.
Everybody, see you later.
Now, it wasn't this whole book.
No, I said
It
that.
was, which one was it?
Muscle the Cantor's Son.
No, you can ignore the front of that book or just enjoy the heck out of it, whatever you choose to do.
Thank you. I thought we were all, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
You're okay. You're okay.
Bye.
Bye, Lynn.
Bye, Ann. Thanks for joining us.
Bye, Ann. Thank you so much. Jeannie, I can't tell if Ann's still here or not.
She's still here. Her video is off, but I don't think she's actually signed up. I just wanted to let you know that I have a spreadsheet, like Patron Services has a spreadsheet, And
Okay.
when I counted the participants, if you count Bruce and Lynn, because that's 2 people, like our
Right.
total would have been 12. So on the patron services program spreadsheet, I'm just going to record 12 people. I don't know if
Okay.
you turn in a separate one or not, but I was going to record it there unless I don't want to double dip or anything.
No, that's good. I don't have to turn it in anywhere, Jeannie.
Okay. Okay.
I need to let Mark know, and we turn these into Jeff Hayes at the book center. So
Okay.
I'll report 12 too.
All right, yeah, so I'm just gonna put that on our program because we do get credit for this program, counting it,
Great.
Good. Anyway, I'll just put 12. And I thought, I was so happy because I tried to do research and be prepared because I just didn't know, are people gonna talk? Or are they gonna be quiet? And I thought it was wonderful. The way, yes, and not only did they participate, that they even asked some of their own questions. I thought that was great. And I'm super thankful that I didn't have to carry, because most of the book clubs I do, because I'm with older retirees, I have to carry that weight. And I was thankful that I didn't have to carry the weight on this one. So.
You know what, Jeannie, if I were not here, anybody in this group could carry the weight on this. This is a brilliant group of informed folks. I'm just so
really
glad to do this program. I'm so grateful.
And Courtney, if this group of people enjoys it and they want to go on past,
absolutely,
are you open to going past and just continuing it if it's a success and they want to go onward?
Absolutely. There is so much wonderful Yiddish literature, and I imagine that we could do some programs in conjunction with the book center. They do multiple free programs every month. We can at the very least share those.
Okay.
I mean, Jeannie, it's just, if you're ever in Massachusetts, you do not have to be Jewish to, it's just amazing. It is absolutely an enormous museum full, it's a living museum full of books. It's
I would
just
love
incredible.
To see. Is your family background Jewish, Courtney? I didn't know that.
Well, I have a great grandfather who was. He came from Poland, and we really do not know much about him. Our feeling is that he ignored the fact that he was to blend in. He died fairly soon. Well, he died after my grandmother was born, and she was baby number 9, and all the kids went into different families in the community, and she really didn't know much about it at all. And this was our suspicion for years and years and years, and then we all had our DNA done, and it came back confirmed that we were Ashkenazi Jews. So, but it's a small portion of my heritage, but I'm just so very interested. We are mostly Irish. We really celebrate St. Patty's Day here, but it was so meaningful to me just to get to see these things, because my grandmother didn't get an opportunity. So I love that so much. But
okay.
Anyway,
well,
Jeannie, thank you so much, and your hair looks so pretty too.
Oh, thank you. It's, you know what, I go once a year and get it trimmed. I'm just lazy. When it's long, it's easier to take care of.
It is. I agree. And with COVID, it may not be worth the risk. I've been twice since this all happened.
Yeah.
So, and I'm fine with that. That's fine. I know I look awful and I don't care.
You always look beautiful, Courtney. Thank you. Okay. Well, listen, I'll go ahead and get that recorded, and I think it went great. A big success.
I do too. Thank you so much. I'm thrilled. And you enjoy that baby and take care.
I will.
Okay.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. See you
Bye-bye.
soon. Thank you. Bye.